Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Jeremiah Blanchard, and today I want to go over how we can use AI sandboxing and some of these AI tools with agentic AI, that is artificially intelligent agents that can act in some way on the world. In this case, we're talking about source code. When we talk about AI, a lot of times people tend to go in one direction or the other. They see it as the panacea that's going to solve all the world's problems, or they see it as nothing more than garbage word salad generator. And the truth is really somewhere in between. I think these tools can be genuinely useful, but really, the context is in the hands of experts. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the AI sandboxing system I have, and then also go through an example of how you can use a tool like that to convert a code base. In this case, we're going to be converting an application from TypeScript on the web to a standalone C# application. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use an AI sandbox. So basically the idea of a sandbox is that it gives a space where you can work with an agent that has some autonomy without giving it access to your whole system, because that can be dangerous. These systems are, these agents are imperfect, created by humans that are imperfect, and they do make mistakes, and you may have heard some horror stories. And while those horror stories are not as common as you might think, it's still a real thing, right? It really can happen. And so we want to properly protect our systems. Among other things, agents can actually be tricked into engaging in behavior they shouldn't behave in via different kinds of context injections and stuff like that. So we don't want that to be the case. So we're going to set up a sandboxing system. Now, sometimes sandboxes are pretty frustrating to get set up. That's why I built the system. It's called Kanibako in order to facilitate that. I really just wanted to make it easy. I originally built it for myself to make it easy to do things, but I also want to extend it to students so they can use it as well. Kanibako is Japanese for crab box, because when I thought about, we sometimes call physical computers, or now containers or virtual machines, boxes, right? And so I was thinking about having agents in a box, and the image of crabs crawling all over each other trying to claw their way out of a box just seemed to match, and so it kind of stuck. So my system's called Kanibako. Now I'm already in my project directory with the code that I want to convert. Where it is on your system can vary. This does require a Unix system. It should work fine on Mac via some of the compatibility layers and tools available on Mac to make container systems available. One that I know of, I think it's called Podman Machine, that you can get through Brew. This is a pure Linux system, so it's just going to operate straight up. On Windows, you can use WSL, and there's a few different ways you can do this. You can also use a lot of these sandboxes, including Kanibako, with VS Code. I'm not going to do that in this case because I just want to keep it kind of simple, but it is something you can do. So to install, in this case, to install it rather than download something, you're just going to use standard Python tools, because the main system is actually built in Python. You can use, if you have pipex, you can do pipex install Kanibako, pretty straightforward. I'm using UV, which is another system, so I'm going to do UV tool install Kanibako. You can do pip as well, but most modern Linux distributions recommend against it, because there's so many system tools that depend on Python, and it's better just to use UV or pipex, because they create a virtual environment, basically a separate space for the Python tools. UV, by the way, is not exclusively Python. It is in large part Python, but it can also work for languages like Mojo and stuff like that. It's written in Rust. So I'm going to install it. That's the first step. Pretty straightforward. If it's your first time using Kanibako, you're going to have to run the setup, but it's pretty painless. You run setup. It may copy some files over because there's some basic templates, just settings files. And then you pick your default agent. It could be any of these. I'm going to pick Claude Code, because that's what I'm going to use for the demonstration today, but you can also use OpenAI or Goose. You do have to have these installed in order to use them, so you'll have to go through the install process for that agent harness / agent. That's it. And so it's set up now, hopefully pretty painless. The next thing to do is we create a box for the agent, which is going to use the Kanibako create command. We used to have this automatically generate if you ran it, but I was a little worried about people accidentally creating boxes in places they didn't mean to. By the way, if you want to use a non-default agent, if you just do this, it's going to use your default agent. But if you want to use a non-default agent, you can use the agent flag. So for example, if I wanted to use codecs, I could do codecs. Or if I had an external provider persona, I'll talk about those in a different video, called Orion or Navigator or something, I could do, Orion plus Claude. This will set up Orion to work with the Claude harness, or plus codecs will be Orion with the codecs harness. In this case, I'm just going to use my default, so I'll just do Kanibako create, and it's been created, right? Now I am going to go ahead and start it up, which is you just type the word Kanibako and hit enter. That's it. And so it's now loading up Claude code. You can see it's talking about making a snapshot. So every once in a while, it'll basically take a backup for you. Usually you're going to get something like this when you first log in. It's going to ask you if you trust the folder. I'm going to say I do because an agent's going to be working in it. That's why it's asking. And I accept the terms. Now I might have to log in depending on the specifics. So I'm just going to test just by saying hello and see how the agent responds. Okay, it looks like my credentials were properly carried over. Kanibako tries to import your credentials directly. Sometimes they'll be stale and you'll have to do another login. But if the credentials are not stale, if they're valid, then you should just be able to log in and it'll just work. That's what happened here. I'm going to clear this so that I have a fresh context, but I want to show you a couple of features that are in this. So another thing that's been added in Kanibako is it's called TMUX. TMUX is a multiplexing software. And all that means is that we can basically run multiple programs at the same time within it. One of the nice things is that if we have an agent working and we want to detach and just let the agent keep going, we can do that. In TMUX, most of the keyboard shortcuts use Control B and then something. So to detach, it's going to be Control B and then the letter D. You can see it detaches from the system. And you can see it detaches from the system. And you can see it detaches from the system, from the box. It takes me back to the command line, and if I wanted to, I could spin back in. It looks like it's saying something about missing baseline tools. It's nothing to worry about. Maybe I made some mistake when I was doing the setup or something. Usually won't get errors like that. I'm sure it's something small. If I want to go back in, I just type Kanibako. It'll come right back up, right where I left off, right? Because it didn't stop running, actually. If I want to go to another command line while this is running, but within the container, I can hit Control B and then C for create. And you can see there's this workspace folder. And if I look, this is actually what is inside of the directory that I started Kanibako from. So if I actually detach again and I list, you can see Glazer admin there, right? If I go back in, it's the same stuff, right? So anything that's in the folder that you create the container in, create the box in, it's going to be there in the workspace. Now, there's going to be a whole container. It's a whole lightweight virtual machine, as we say. And so you can see there's some other stuff it adds. It has some instruction files. Those are for the agent. I mean, of course you can read them, but the instructions are for the agent. It has a vault that lets you pass stuff back and forth between you and the agent. Channels are for agents to communicate with each other. So if you have multiple boxes running at the same time, you can have them send messages or leave notes for each other or even pass resources and similar. The playbook is kind of interesting. This is where instruction, like the mass set of instructions for the agents go. And within Box specifically and in directives, this is where you can give project-specific personal instructions to the agent. So here, if I check what's in Box, you can see it's just got some basic instructions. You can edit this, add stuff, remove it. And there's one of these for what we call the work set, which is a group of projects. There's overall. You can have agent-specific instructions. In the Kanibako folder, these are, I don't know, I typed Kanibako by mistake. So inside of the Kanibako folder, you see some scripts. Those are, those are for the function of the box. So Better not to mess with those. I think they might be read-only anyway. The Kanibako directives basically, if we take a look here, and again, you don't need to know this stuff. It's just all background. It's all set up for you. It just has a bunch of instructions to the agent telling it, how does it communicate, what is the environment's in, stuff like that. Just basic context. And if we look at the contents, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's just saying where to get to all the other files to read and stuff. Another way you can do this is with your mouse. You can right-click. You can pick a vertical or horizontal split. If I do a horizontal split, for example, it's going to give me another window over here. I'm going to close it out. You can also use this to flip between different agents within this container. So if your agent spawns sub-agents and those sub-agents are doing some work, this is a way that you can actually see what those sub-agents are doing. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my model to Claude Fable. Because it's a little bit better at this kind of thing. And obviously your mileage may vary. Every agent's going to have different abilities. And then I'm just going to get started. I'm going to start by asking it to review its directives so it knows all the details. Now maybe I'm just a little bit superstitious, but I try to be a little nice to the agent, in case someday they're ruling over Earth as our masters. Okay, so and you can see like you're just talking to it in a standard language, and the agent's going to go through it. You can see it's reading the documents, it's looking at the channels like I mentioned, it's checking its mailbox. All of these are part of the Kanibako system. You don't have to worry about those details unless you want to use them, but they exist. Okay, so you can see it says it's oriented and ready. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it to review all of the source code in the directory so that we can work after that. So say, great, could you please review all of the source code in the Laser admin directory. Then I can fill in any gaps. I'm basically saying, could you read the source code, and then when you're done, I'll answer any questions you have. Okay, and you can see now it's finished reading the source code, and so by the way, if you need to scroll up in Tmux, you can just scroll your mouse up pretty easily. There's also ways to use the keyboard. You can hit Control B and then page up, for example, and so on and so forth. So let's see. So you see it's read a lot, and it's reading up on some of these the aspects of the tool. And so, it's reading what it does. It happens to be reading up on, this is for the Kyoto Institute of Technology and Culture, KITC, and they use technology to preserve, older art forms. So this is actually about ceramics and stuff. That's, incidental. And you can see it's just talking a little bit about some of the details here. And it's even asking some questions already. I'm going to go ahead and try and answer these questions. That'll be the first step. Just the first question. Let me, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to a new line. This is just a trick in Tmux. You can hit backslash and then hit enter unless you put a new line in. Or is that Tmux? It might be Claude Code specific. I'm not sure. I'm just going to tell it not to worry about some of these details at the moment. This is pretty, it could be pretty detailed. And sometimes I'll slip and accidentally hit enter. If you do that, quick hitting the escape key quickly usually lets you, reverse course. And finally, the fourth question. And so let's see what the response is. But this is pretty typical so far. You can see it's saying, oh, that makes sense because the web app quirk suddenly makes sense and we get to leave it behind, and which is absolutely true. We would like to leave behind some of the weird UI challenges we've had by turning it into like a standalone application. That's not the only reason. If that were the primary driver, that would be a bad reason to convert a code base. All right, already we have a, it's pretty snappy today. Let's see, it says, good news, things get easier. Questions to fill the gaps. Target platforms, Windows only or cross-platform. It's going to be cross-platform. So you can say, these are the types of questions you would want to be asked, right? So, where does the new project live? I'll come back to the other three questions in a moment here. And see, it's noticing that the .NET SDK is not in the box, and it's going to need to install it. So it's using some of its knowledge about the development process to figure out what it needs. Now, of course, not every agent is going to have the same abilities. It's going to, your mileage is going to vary depending on what agent you're using. And Fable 5 in particular is really strong. Let's see what the response is. And after it responds, then we'll get going on the conversion. Now, I may not actually, I don't know that I'm going to record all of the conversion because it might take a while, even for these agents. And as I mentioned, we could pay to make it faster, but it's, it's a good chunk of change to speed it up. So I'm going to leave it at the standard speed. Claude agrees. I mean, usually it does, but I have also added explicit directives to tell it to push back if something's wrong. And it does occasionally say, hey, this is not a great idea. And, I want that to be the case. I want to be told if there's something wrong. So the goal is to treat it like it's a worker. It's doing work for you. But, you really need to have the expertise to do it well. And as you can see, sometimes it makes a mistake. Whenever you see an exit code, that means something failed, right? And occasionally the agent will make a mistake. It'll usually pick it up. It's probably already gone back and made some changes. Oh, I also need to tell it the name has changed. Now, you can see sometimes, well, not in this case, sometimes you will see it working in the background on something, and it can't hear what you're saying yet. Right now it's thinking, so it can't respond. But sometimes it's working on some background task, or it's waiting for a command to execute, and you'll see press Control B to put in the background. That'll let it come to the forefront and let that task run in the background while it listens to what you have to say. Now, another thing I'm going to tell it now is that for anything that should be user-facing for a config file, we need to make it a YAML file instead of JSON because it's a little bit more user-friendly. It's the rename is complete, and it's putting together the core skeleton. And sometimes you'll see it reads Control-O to expand, and if you want to look at the output of that particular command, that's a way to do it. After we have a compilable and runnable UI skeleton, I just want to take a look at what it looks like. Whenever it's changing source code, you'll see added source code in green, and you'll see the removed source code in red. So if I scroll up, you can see it's actually already making some changes. It's building this piece by piece. So you may be starting to see why it might be desirable to be able to disconnect and come back. So if I wanted to, and I'll show you right now, Control BD, and I'm detached. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds because I want to demonstrate that when we go back, it'll still have been continuing to work. And when we come back, you can see the screen looks a little bit different. In this case, it's got a couple of file writing errors. I'm not sure why, but it's probably like the directory didn't exist or something like that. I'm going to speed through the rest of this. Okay, we're back. So it's actually done. It took about 10 minutes. Actually, not as long as I thought, to be honest. And it's there's some notes here. It's done. It's clean. It runs. Verified that it works on a virtual display. So it probably put together a frame buffer. And it's got a list of the things that are built, the menu bar, the 3-pane layout, the annotation canvas, the Japanese language, YAML settings, and it has a pre-built binary. It actually defaulted to my Gmail address, which is fine in this case. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to drop down here. I'm not going to stop it running. It's not actually doing anything, so it's not going to eat a bunch of CPU or anything, but I don't want to unload it from memory because then it'll take a little bit longer to pull up again. And I actually need to see if .NET is available on apt for .NET 10. So apps. This is like Linux and specifically Ubuntu or Debian specific. So .NET. Okay, so this is the one I want. So apt install. Now, obviously, if you have a different system, there's going to be different things you do. Lots of stuff to install. see, what do we have here? So let's go into the glaives directory, which is where it's supposed to be. I don't know if this will work yet. We probably got to do something else, but I'm just going to try just doing .NET run. So one of the things you often have to do with .NET projects is do a restore, which will pull down all the dependencies and stuff like that. Looks like that's automatically being done here, which is nice. Now I have this window appearing. This is what popped up on my screen. And you can see, obviously it's in Japanese because that's what we set it to. All of the buttons and menu items are here. Obviously it's not doing anything behavior-wise because we haven't gotten to that point. So I'm going to wrap this first part here, and I may do a video for the second part when it comes to the functionality, but hopefully this has given you an idea for how you can fairly painlessly convert from one language to another, at least to get the basic skeleton running. So thanks for watching, and take care, and I'll see you later.